Hello, everyone. Welcome to another class. Today we have Winsor and Newton products that we are going to explore a new product. It's our drawing ink. It's not new to our portfolio, but we hope we have some new artists out there that haven't tried this before. I'm Jeannie Breedy, and I'm the marketing director here, and I have Mandy Peltier today that's going to be demonstrating using Winsor and Newton drawing inks to create these lovely floral blooms. So I'm going to just jump right in because it's a really fun project and we need all the time. So take it away, Mandy.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be with everyone today. I hope you're doing well. I see some familiar faces in the audience, so that's kind of fun that I have some returning students and I'm recognizing you. So welcome. As you know, we have an hour, so I kind of want to just dive right in because it's not a lot of time, at least for me, to tell you everything that I want to share. But like Jeannie said, we will be focusing on a new medium today. Well, it's not a new medium, but new to my classes, and that is drawing inks. And I'm going to tell you all about them, how to use them, how they differ from watercolor and how they're similar. Because it's my first class with this medium, I am going to do a little bit of demoing just to give you a little bit of an understanding of how these work and how we're going to be completing this project. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my other camera so we can just get started. Okay, as usual, I'm starting with the overhead view just so I can kind of go through the materials that you're going to need today. This is just the finished painting right here so we can kind of look at it and use it as a guide as we work today. You should have a cold press piece of watercolor paper cut to 8 by 10, an artist palette with individual wells, a saucer or cup with water. You don't need much today, and you'll see why in just a little bit. These are the drying inks. We're just using two colors, Brilliant Green and Brick Red. And then one item that may have looked a bit peculiar on the supply list was pipettes, and here's what they look like. These are actually pretty important for this project, and I'll explain why in just a little bit. If you don't have pipettes, I'll try to give you some guidance on what you can do instead, but I do recommend when you are using drying inks that you use pipettes. And then it uses two round brushes, and number 10 is what we'll use for the most part, and then a number 2. And then a graphite pencil and eraser. I always use paper towels when I'm painting, and then a heat gun or blow dryer. So basically what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be making 10 separate layers to draw or to paint on each of these blooms. And we want the layers to be fully dry before we start the next layer, and to sort of help that process along so we don't accidentally paint wet on wet today. That's the purpose of the heat gun or blow dryer. Now, a heat gun emits less force of air than a blow dryer. So if you have a blow dryer, it may help if you kind of hold your blow dryer a little further back and maybe even block some of the force with your hand, and then move it closer as you feel comfortable and feel like you have control. So I just wanted to share that really quick. And then as usual, I'll just point out when we're done today, we love to see your finished work. I love to see the artwork of my students. I got some really creative drawings sent to me from my class a week ago. It was super awesome. So you can use the hashtag #MakeItWithMichaels, hashtag Winsor and Newton, hashtag Michael's classes. You can tag me on Instagram at Mandy Peltier Artist. You can also send me an email if you go to my website, mandypeltier.com, and use the contact tab. But where we're going to start today is we are going to start by drawing the outline onto our 8 by 10 sheet of paper. So I'm going to move a few things out of the way so I have room to sketch the outline. So what you'll need right now is your 8 by 10 sheet of watercolor paper, your graphite pencil, and an eraser. And the outline today, I'm going to call them lollipops. I kind of think they look like 3 lollipops. You have one here on the left, one here on the right, one here in the middle. I am just going to freehand draw these today. I'm not going to give you specific instructions with a ruler like I've been doing in my classes. These circles are they are 2.5 inches all around. They just so happen to be the perfect size of the bottom of my mason jar. So if you have a cup or a coffee mug or a mason jar, you can always just use that to trace around. Or if you happen to have a circle stencil, you'll use the one that's 2.5 inches. So you can use those little shortcuts if you need, but I am just going to freehand draw them. You know, some projects I've done, it's really important that what we draw is symmetrical. The snowflake class I did a few weeks ago is an example of that. But really, this is just a guide for us. It's just to help us with our first layer. And then from there, we don't use the outline. So if it's not perfectly circular, symmetrical, or round, it's really okay. So I am going to start my first circle. I'm going to draw this left one here. So you can see the left one is sort of in between the right one and the bottom one. So I'm just going to sort of eyeball and draw a circle that is about 2.5 inches in length. And I'm not going to fuss with it too much because, again, this is really just to help me with my first layer. And I'll wait on my stem. And then I'll draw my right one, which is a little bit above the left one I just drew. It's kind of the taller one. And this one, I'm also going to try and draw a circle that's about the same size. As you can see, mine are wonky. They're not perfect. That's okay. It's just a guide for the first layer. And then the very bottom one is sort of in between the two I just drew and below. So here I go again, drawing another wonky circle that's about 2.5 inches all the way around. So it does not have to be perfect. I think this might be a record for the fastest we've ever drawn an outline in one of my classes. So
I have to agree with you on that.
Yes.
Record time, everyone.
All right, so this gives us a lot of time to demo and learn about drawing inks. Okay, so the next thing we're going to draw are the stems, and they're just slightly curved straight lines. I'm going to start by drawing the far left one, and so I'm just going to do a slightly curved line down. And then I'll draw the short one for the bottom lollipop, and I think mine's going to be even shorter than what's in my outline here. You can always trace the outline too. I should have said that. You can use your window like a light box and just trace the outline, or if you have a light box, you can use that. But this is simple enough. I think we can all handle it. And then this upper right one, the stem sort of is tucked behind and is hidden behind this lower circle. This is a painting or a design that it's just very repetitive. And so I wanted to put something in there that was of interest or switched it up a little bit. So that's why I like this particular stem to be kind of hidden behind this bottom lollipop. But you can do any composition you want. You could put on more blooms or less blooms or just one big giant bloom. You could do it however you want. So, and the other really nice thing about this project is that it's repetitive. It's the same thing 3 times. So you can feel free today to just do one of them if it would help you kind of keep pace with me better. And then you could paint the other 2 after the class is over. And the other good news is I'll be repeating what we're doing 3 times. So it should be really emphasized and reiterated many times today what we're doing. So with that, I want to get started by just kind of demonstrating a few things for you, introduce drawing inks for you. So I'm going to, I have another 8x10 sheet of paper here. And you guys can just watch this. Don't try to do this along with me because I'm going to do a couple different things as I demo than what we're going to actually do on this project. But drawing inks, what are they? Okay, so I kind of introduced drawing inks a week ago in my Valentine card class, and we used the gold drawing ink, which is a unique type of drawing ink because it's like the other drawing inks in that it is ink inside a shellac binder. So they are colored using ink instead of pigment, but the gold drying ink is unique in that it has ink and pigment in it, not just ink. The 2 colors we're using today are colored only with ink in a shellac binder. And so they are in liquid form. They're not in a dry cake or pan form or in a really thick paste form. They are liquid, just like water is a liquid. And so you do want to take care in how you use these. Because I don't want to dilute the ink in the shellac binder that's in the container, that is why I like to work with drawing inks using pipettes, because I can use pipettes to pull up the ink and dispense that ink into my palette. And that way I'm never adding water to the bottle and diluting the ink. So the reason why we have 3 pipettes on the supply list is that we're going to use 1 pipette for the red, 1 pipette for the green, and 1 pipette for the water. But before we get there, let me just tell you a little bit more about drawing ink so you kind of have a basic understanding before we get started. I actually have a second water glass just for this demoing, and I have a second number 10 round brush just for the demoing. because I'm going to do something I'm not going to recommend you guys do. And I'm going to stick this dry brush, I haven't used any water, directly into the container. So I'm not adding any water because it's dry. And I'm just going to pick up a thick amount of this brick red drying ink. And you can just see how vivid and bright it is right out of the bottle. Super vivid and bright. And that's because of the dye that the drying ink is colored with. So drying inks, they dry a little bit faster than watercolor. So that's another way that they're different. They dry a little bit faster than watercolor, but like watercolor, they are water soluble. So I can take my wet brush and put it in the water and then brush right under the drying ink. I can wet my brush again, wipe it off, and I can create still a gradient wash with it. So they are water soluble. They're also intermixable. So you can mix any of the colors in the line and create a new color just like you can with watercolor. Another thing that's a little bit different with drying inks is they are more water resistant when they're dry. So if you've worked with watercolor before, even when the watercolor is dry on the paper, you can usually reactivate it to a point with a wet brush. But with drying inks, it's not impossible to do that, but they are more resistant once they're dry. So it sort of sounds contradictory that they are water soluble, but they're also water resistant when dry, but both are true with drying inks. So I'm going to draw 3 little circles here because I want to kind of show you the process that we're going to do, and also a couple things that we should try to avoid today as we complete this project. Okay, so first let me talk to you about the technique. I'm going to make just a little light wash using this brick red ink. So I'm going to put just a few drops of water into one of the wells on my palette. Again, just watch right now. You don't need to do this along with me. And I'm going to stir it with my number 10 brush. So to paint on every single layer of these flowers, we are going to do what I have called, or what I've heard referred to as a C stroke, because you're making a stroke that looks like the letter C, only we're going to be repeating that stroke again and again. Only we're going to be doing this stroke all the way around in a circle versus doing it in a straight line. So we're going to go all the way around our circle using a C stroke, and they kind of look like scallops or petals. But do you know how I mentioned that drying inks dry fast? So instead of doing the outline for all of our scallops and then painting in the middle, we're going to do something different because drying inks dry fast. And if we were to do a whole layer where we just do the outline of the scallops and then fill in the rest of the layer with color, I'm going to show you what happens. All right, so let's see what we notice here. I'm going to hold this up to the camera so you can see better. You can see the outline even after I've painted in the rest of the layer. And that is because the drying ink already started to dry on the outline. And so then instead of having one even layer of color, what we've done is we've actually created 2 layers on what's only supposed to be 1 layer. I hope that makes sense. So what we're going to do instead, and this is the best way I have found to sort of mitigate this issue of drying inks drying so fast, because we want the scallops to be even and not to see 2 layers where there should only be 1. What we're going to do instead is we're going to paint the outline for 3 scallops. Then we'll fill in those scallops and pull our brush towards the middle of the paper. And then we'll paint on 3 more scallops, fill them in, and then pull the ink towards the middle. Paint on 3 more scallops, fill them in, and pull our ink towards the middle. And all of these scallops are about 1/2 inch wide if you were to measure it from side to side. And it's about 1/4 inch above the outline. So they're not real big. It's really just a comfortable size that you can make with a number 10 brush. But you can see by doing it this way, it's a much more even wash of color, and the outline bleeds in or blends into the rest of the layer. So this is what we want to try to achieve. So we want to sort of do the outline of 3 scallops or petals, fill in those petals or outlines, and then move our wet brush towards the middle. Now, another thing that I want to try and encourage all of us to avoid is having way too much ink on our brush at once, because I have this kind of down to a science where basically we're going to
Andy?
put yes.
Hey, it's Jeannie. Sorry, I think because this is such a new concept, we're using drawing inks. We are obviously Winsor Newton. We're sponsoring this class today. There's a plethora of different types of inks that are out there, but in order to get this desired effect, we are using the Winsor Newton. But yes, you can use those other inks. It does have, because the pigment will vary, your results will vary. So I suggest you follow along with us, but then again, if you don't like the results, then give it a go. You might want to just purchase one of the inks to try it on the next time. As always, all these classes are recorded. We would love for you to participate, but sometimes it might just be easier to just watch it and then create the artwork on your own afterwards. So thank you for these great questions, and I'll continue to keep up on the chat.
Thank you, Jeannie. I would also say that some inks are in an alcohol solution versus a shellac solution, so they aren't exactly the same thing. And like calligraphy inks, for instance, are not going to be water resistant when dry, like the drying inks. So these are unique. They're not exactly like other inks that are on the market. So I just want to point that out. But for this particular project, the other thing I was going to say that we want to try and avoid is having too much ink on our brush. And the reason why is we are going to be drying each of these layers when we're done before we apply another layer. But also I have this class down to a science. It took me a few tries to find the right amount, but we're going to put a specific amount of water in one of these palettes and then a specific amount of ink for each layer. And so our mixture at first is going to be way more water than ink. And then gradually, as we get to the last layer, it's going to be more ink than water. And that's sort of how we go from really light layer to slightly darker, all the way to dark. So it's going to get more saturated as we move and apply each layer. So to make sure you have enough to work with in your palette and to make sure we don't have a problem that I'm going to show you in a second, when you put ink on your brush, you will want to wipe it on the edge or rim of your palette a few times so that your brush is evenly wet and has ink on it evenly, but to where it's not sopping or soaking wet. Because if you were just to pick up a lot of ink on your brush and then apply it to your paper, do you see how much ink that is? And then when we go to dry it, watch what will happen. You're going to get these ribbons that sort of shoot off into the paper, or you're going to get harsh lines. You see that ribbon that just went off? And so we want to try and avoid that. So not only will you run out of ink in your palette, you'll also get these ribbons and or really harsh lines along the edge. So just try to remember 3 or 4 times, wipe your brush on the edge of your palette to remove excess ink and to put it back in that container. All right, so this was sort of the demo I wanted to show you, the do's and don'ts and what drying ink is. I've made a few other projects with drying inks. This little card here, this little colorful design, I did mostly with pure drying ink, and then I diluted it with water as I washed it out to the side. Just the other day, I made this little butterfly just to play around with drying inks, and I just made this with a couple of colors where you kind of concentrate it along the edges, and then you use a watered down wash to add it to the rest of the wings. So they are a lot of fun to work with, and I can just get a lot more vivid, vibrant results with drying inks than I can with watercolor, or at least I can get it more quickly. And then also because of the shellac binder, so shellac is sort of like nature's plastic. It's a type of resin. It leaves this really nice finish when it's dry. Like a shiny film, like a nice plastic looking, well, resin shellac finish. And you won't necessarily notice that on our first few layers where it's way more water than ink, but you'll start to notice that shellac finish as we get to the final layers when it's more ink than water. Okay, so are we ready? have I demoed for you enough? Let's go. All right, so I'm going to move this to the side. Yes.
I have to say, yes, you're asking quite a few questions. The same questions keep coming up. Just continue to reinforce the virtues of this type of ink. That's what distinguishes it from India ink, acrylic ink. It's just how it's going to be drying and the effects that you're going to get.
Yes, absolutely. It's really a pleasure to work with. So if you're taking this class today and you don't actually have drying inks, I hope that this will whet your appetite and incentivize you to just give it a try. And this class only uses 2 colors so that, you don't necessarily have to make a big investment to try them. Oh, and before we begin, I just remembered I need to pull out my color wheel. I have pulled this out the last 2 classes and I want to pull it out today too, because I'm going to teach you a little bit more about color theory and color harmony today. So my last 2 classes, my Valentine's card class last week and my snowflake class a few weeks ago, the color palette was analogous, meaning the colors were right next to each other on the color wheel. I have a new color palette today. The color palette today is called complementary. And a complementary palette is when you have 2 colors that are directly opposite of each other on the color wheel. So red and green, blue and orange, yellow and violet. So it means these 2 colors look nice together. They complement each other. Red and green, are Christmas colors. A lot of sports teams choose their colors based on complementary colors on the color wheel. So I just wanted to point that out. If you're ever stuck, let's say you're drawing a banana and you don't know what background color to give it, well, violet would be an option because it's complementary, it's opposite on the color wheel. I'm going to teach you a little bit more about color theory in a bit, about what happens when we mix complementary colors together. But I think that's enough for now. I just want you to know that this is a complementary palette. Okay. All right. So with that, the first thing we're going to do, pull down your water, pull down one of your pipettes. Well, I'm saying pull down because I'm at a drafting table, but grab one of your pipettes, and this pipette is just going to be used for the water. So squeeze the top of it, put it in your water, release your pressure, and it will pull up or suck up some water. Now, when you're using the pipette, you will want to squeeze the pipette gently so that it dispenses drops of water instead of a steady stream, because we're going to be using drops today, not a stream of water. So I'm going to be quiet here in just a second for about a minute so we can all think and count and focus. I am going to dispense 40 drops of water into one of the wells or containers on my palette. I have found generally I can get about 20 drops of water out of my pipette before I need to release what's in there, pull up some more water, and then do the other 20 drops. So I just want to throw that out there. You may have to fill up your pipette 2 times as we do this. But I'm going to be quiet now, and let's all dispense 40 drops of water into one of the wells on our palette. Okay, I hope that was enough time for everyone. If not, keep going. If you lost count, you could just go ahead and add a few more drops than what you think are 40, but you probably don't want to do less than 40, or you could run out of the mixture as we paint on all the layers. Go ahead and place your water aside with the water pipette in it. Just place it off to the side. And we're not going to use it for a little bit. And this will prevent you from being tempted to place your brush in the water. Although I say that, you do need to place your number 10 brush in the water to get it wet. So let's do that first. I'm going to stir my number 10 brush in the water to get it nice and wet, the bristles. Okay, and I'm going to wipe the bristles on the edge of the palette a few times. Okay, now put your water glass aside. After you've wet your number 10 brush, do that. And then with your brick red drying ink, go ahead and open it up. Mine's already open because I demoed with it, but go ahead and open yours up, grab pipette number 2, and do the same thing where you squeeze the top of the pipette, place it in your drying ink jar, release your pressure, allow the pipette to suck up that ink. And I go ahead when I'm done using my drying ink, we're going to use this throughout the class. So you can just rest your pipette in the jar and just sort of set your pipette up where you're not going to accidentally knock it over. I've done that with masking fluid. I've never done it with drying ink. Knock on wood, I won't do it today. And what we're going to do for layer 1 is we're going to place 2 drops of brick red drying ink into the well that has the 40 drops of water in it. So I'm going to do 1, 2, just 2 drops.
Mandy, I'm just going to jump in real quick for a second. I just want to give a shout out. I'm going to give Fred a shout out here. He actually converted the drops. So he said that his equivalent of 24 drops is a quarter teaspoon for those of you that do not have a pipette. But let's just be creative if you don't have that. So Mandy, if you want to give them any other suggestions that we discussed for people who don't have pipettes, and they are sold separately. They do help with this project. So for go forward, something to consider as a purchase.
Yeah, and the pipettes are really more important for the ink than they are for the water. You could just do maybe 5 or 6 scoops of water. You know how in my previous classes, I've used my brush like a scoop, like a spoon, and I scoop water into my palette. You could do 5 or 6 scoops, and that should be enough water. But if you don't have a pipette for the ink, the best thing I could recommend is you carefully pour a little bit into the cap of the drying ink. And then when I say 2 scoops, you just put the very tip of your brush into the ink, dispense it into the container, and then do that a second time. And then when the class is over, instead of dumping this back into the jar, you would just dispose of what's in the cap so that you're not adding water back into the jar.
Another great idea I know for those, because I just saw it on the chat, was a medicine dropper, which is fantastic. I mean, and those of you that have kids, I know I can't imagine all the different dispensers I have for medicines as well. So an eyedropper, a medicine dropper, everybody's giving some really good creative ideas. Thank you for being so resourceful.
All right. Yes, that is very helpful. Thank you. Okay. So with my wet number 10 brush, I'm going to stir the water mixture, because I don't know if you notice, the ink just sort of drops to the bottom of the water. So I'm going to stir it up, and it's going to make this nice light wash. And then, like I said, we're going to wipe our brush along the rim of the palette 3 or 4 times to release excess ink. I'm going to start my first scallop or petal by placing my brush right on my outline, and I'm going to go up and then pull it back down. And I'm going to repeat that 2 times. And then if you remember from my demo, I'm going to go ahead and fill in those 3 scallops and pull my brush towards the middle. To put more ink on my brush, I'm just going to put the tip of my brush into my water mixture, wipe it, and then I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do the outline for 3 scallops, fill those in, pull my brush in towards the middle. And I'm going to be very repetitive today, since this is a very repetitive project. So I'm going to repeat what I'm doing on the next 2 blooms as well. But because drying inks do tend to dry a lot faster than watercolor, even by adding this water to it, it is, you'll have to try your best to move quickly so that we're not doing the problem where you're going to be applying wet paint onto already dry paint. And then, so I'll repeat the process for this upper one. I'm going to put my brush in the ink. I'm going to wipe it 3 to 4 times. I'm going to start my first scallop on my outline. I'm going to pull it up and then down, up and then down, up and then down. I'm going to fill in those petals and then pull my brush towards the middle. I'm going to put a little bit more ink on my brush, but I'm always going to wipe it on the rim of my palette. Paint on 3 more outlines of scallops, fill those in, draw my wet or pull my wet brush towards the middle.
Mandy, people are asking, which I want to just reinforce, every one of the classes is available on the Michaels website, just where you enrolled under classes, but I'll put it in the chat. It's michaels.com/classes. And all the recordings are available there for any of the classes that Mandy has taught. And you could watch them. They'll be available in about 24 hours.
Thank you. And if you go to my website, if you go to published tutorials, workshops, and classes, there's links to all of my Michaels classes, if that would be easier to find them than going through Michaels YouTube channel. I've taught, I think this might be my 6th one, I've lost count. So I have taught a few. My first 3 classes were done using watercolor pencils. My last two were Cotman watercolor cakes, and then this one is drawing ink. So I am a mixed media artist. It's a lot of fun. I like variety. If you've attended my other classes, you know I like variety. So it's fun to explore different mediums with you all. All right, depending on the size of your circles, you may fit on more or less scallops than what I'm fitting on. It's totally fine. The process is still going to be the same. But if I say it'll be 11 or 12 scallops on this layer, well, if your circle is not the same size as mine, you may have only 8 scallops, or you may have 15 scallops. It just sort of depends on the size of your scallops and how big the circle was that you started off with. But I have applied the first layer to all 3 of my blooms. So now I'm going to use my heat gun or your blow dryer. I'm going to turn this on and I'm going to run it over these layers for maybe 20, 25 seconds just to make sure they're all dry.
Another thing, Mandy, is that we've put all the chat in the chat, all the links to even this dryer. They're available at Michael's. The pipettes are available at Michael's. So all the links are in the chat. So if you're not familiar with them, if you click on it now, it'll take you right to the Michael's website, and then you can hold that page for later if you'd like to purchase. And all the classes have been recorded, and I will put the link in the chat as well on the Michael's website.
Thank you. And you found the perfect time to interject that, Jeannie, because I had to blow dry my layers. So that was
I know. This is an active crowd. This is an active class. Really good feedback, lots of questions, so it's all good. But a lot of it's because it's a new medium that we're using. As Mandy said, she came to us through use of pencils and colored pencils, watercolor pencils, and now we've evolved, and she's, like I said, a mixed media. So we encourage you to try all the different mediums that we have available to through Winsor and Newton. And watercolor was the other question, Mandy. I wanted to interject here because you had mentioned that this technique can be accomplished in a varying way with the use of watercolor. But we're going to focus on drawing inks today, but later on she'll show you an example of how it can be achieved with watercolor.
Yes, I would be happy to do that. Okay, so I'm not sure if I reiterated this enough or said it enough, but keep your brush out of your water container. The water that's in the well on your palette is sufficient to keep your brush wet. So that's kind of why I asked us to set our water glass aside. It might be tempting to rinse it out or to put it in your water jar, but just keep it with you. We're going to keep our glass of water completely clean until the very, very end. Okay. So for layer 2, we're going to add 2 more drops of brick red to our water mixture. So we're gradually going to change the percentage of water to ink as we make each layer. Now, the second layer requires a little bit of explanation, and then the layers after this will be super quick because it's basically the same thing. But what I'm going to do, I'll just kind of demo with the back side of my brush, is I'm going to apply my first scallop so that it's slightly under and goes in between 2 scallops from the previous layer. And this will ensure that my second layer is just a little bit smaller than my first layer. So I would say it's about 1/4 of an inch below the first layer, but my first scallop, I'm gonna just choose 2 scallops from the previous layer. And I'm just gonna sort of draw on my first outline so it goes in between and slightly below 2 scallops from the previous layer. And then from there, I'm not really gonna worry if each subsequent scallop falls perfectly in between 2 scallops from the previous layer. I just like to start it that way because it kind of helps my positioning and make sure that my second layer will be just a little bit smaller than my first layer. So we can go ahead and stir our drying ink.
And we'll Maybe one other question. I just want to reiterate to everyone in the chat. Although the chat does not exist when you go to the YouTube, Mandy has included the hashtags, which we would love for you to post your creations at Make It With Michaels, hashtag Winsor Newton, hashtag Michaels Classes. But also Mandy's included her direct, her website and her handle, and also recognize that this is in the recording, so you could always refer to it. So that was what we're trying to be mindful about that, because we recognize that it's not available on the YouTube recording when it gets posted. So it's there if you need it for future reference. And Mandy, don't you include all these details on your website for all your previous classes?
I do, yeah. Okay. If you go to that page I mentioned earlier, the published classes, workshops, and tutorials, you'll see everything you need there. I do provide it there. So
But
yeah,
that's on your website, right, Mandy?
website, my website.
Yes.
I mean, I do post about my classes on social media as well, but yeah, my website has all the information you would need also.
Great. Thank you for that.
Oh, sure. Okay, so second layer. I'm going to start my first scallop. So it goes slightly under, but in between two scallops from the previous layer. And I'm going to repeat the same process where I do the outline for 3, fill them in, move my brush towards the middle. And so each layer will get a little bit faster because it's going to be a little bit smaller. And then again, I'm not worrying about, after that very first scallop, I'm not worrying about perfectly lining up these new scallops in between two scallops from the previous layer. It's just that first one, because it sort of sets my layer and gets me where I need to be to make sure the first layer is slightly smaller than the second layer, because I want to be able to see like the tips of the petals or the tips of the scallops from the first layer, but also now see the entirety of the second layer. So I'll hold that up close so you can see what it looks like. But we're going to repeat that on the second bloom and on the third bloom. Now, the funny thing is these are supposed to be roses, but I look at them and they remind me of peonies or chrysanthemums even. So I've just been calling them blooms, but still, they're just really pretty and fun. And I think they kind of have a kaleidoscope sort of look, or like a 3D look by the time you're done. So I get excited to teach all of the classes that I do here, but there's some that I get really excited about. And I think what makes me get really excited is when it's either just a totally new medium or technique, or when it's just a lot of fun to make. And I think this is just a really fun project. So I really enjoy this, and I hope you guys are enjoying it as well. But I'm just continuing to make my second layer exactly the same as my first layer. It's just slightly smaller. And I'm not following my own advice. I did more outlines there than what I've told you all to do. So I'm having to fill that in fast. All right. So I'll walk you through on this third bloom in case you need a little more help here. I'm going to start my first outline so that it is a little bit beneath, but goes in between two scallops from the previous layer. Then I'm not going to worry about doing the same for the rest of the layer. But I'm going to do the outline of 3 scallops, fill them in, pull my ink towards the middle. And you can see I do not have a lot of ink on my brush. It's just enough to fill in the tooth. I'm going to place my brush back in my ink, wipe my brush on the rim of the palette. I'm going to do 3 more outlines of scallops, fill them in, pull it towards the middle. Wet my brush, 3 more scallops, fill them in, pull it towards the middle, and repeat. All right, so this layer I was able to squeeze on 10 to 11 scallops, or it should be about that. And then as soon as you're done with all 3 blooms, we're going to dry them again with our heat gun. And drying inks dry fast, so your first one is probably already dry. It's probably just the second one that needs a little bit, and then the last one you did probably needs the most attention. All right. And when you remove your heat, if it still feels a little cool to the touch, it's probably still a little damp and you could probably go over it just for a couple more seconds, but we're ready for layer 3. Layer 3 gets 2 more drops of ink. That's not always true. So if you have the written instructions, you'll see that, but layer 3 gets 2 drops. We're gonna stir it with our brush and we now have a slightly more concentrated or darker ink mixture. I'm gonna wipe my brush. Layer 3 is the exact same as layer 2. I'm going to start my first scallop so it goes slightly below, but in between 2 scallops from the previous layer. So you get a lot of practice with scallops today. And then after I do the outline for 3, I'm going to fill them in, move my brush towards the middle. So you should now be able to still see the scallops from layer 1, some of the scallops from layer 2, and then we're adding on a 3rd layer. And this layer should be smaller, a little bit faster. And it's okay if all of your scallops are not exactly the same size. Mine are not, they never are. There is just, you know, some variance with your stroke and your angle. So it's still gonna look perfect. And like I said, like a kaleidoscope or 3D when you're done. So just do the best you can to make them all about the same size, but it's okay if there's some variance. All right. And like I said earlier, if I'm moving a little fast for you today, feel free to just focus on one of the blooms. I've made just single blooms before. It's really pretty. And you can make this project using any of the drying ink colors. As I was practicing this project, I made some using the purple drying ink, and I made some using the blue drying ink. So you can use any of the ink colors for this project. And you could choose 2 complementary colors like we're doing here, or you could choose 2 colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. You could just choose green for your stems and then whatever color you want for your buds, whatever you want to do. All right, so I've just finished layer 3. We're going to once again use our heat tool to dry this layer. And we are chugging right along here. So I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I did at the beginning. These blooms get 10 layers total, but the last 2 layers are for the pollen or the anthers on the inside of the bloom, because they're meant to look like wide open, super ripe flowers, if you will. So the last 2 layers are just for the anthers, sometimes called pollen. So there's 8 layers total for the scallops or the petals. So we're ready for layer 4. Layer 4 will also get 2 drops of ink into that water mixture, the water ink mixture. Go ahead and use your brush to stir it. So we're just, as we pull water out of it by applying it and adding ink, we're changing the ratio just a little bit. I'm going to wipe my brush a few times because I don't want too much ink. I don't want to create those ribbons that I showed you when I was demoing. Whoops, and I just dropped my brush on the paper. Have you ever done that? It's so frustrating when you do that. But I'm going to channel Bob Ross here and call it a happy little accident. All right, so we're going to start layer 4 in the exact same way, where I'm going to do a scallop that's slightly below and goes in between 2 scallops from the previous layer, and then pull my brush towards the middle. And this layer is going to be smaller than the last. So it should move a little bit faster because you're going to be able to squeeze on less scallops. And we're going to do the same to the other 2 blooms. Jeannie, are there any other questions?
You know, we're going along. We keep putting out more information on the chat. But as I said earlier, the information about how to access the details of this class are on michaels.com/classes. But Mandy's website, which is in the top corner, is where you would also find any of the classes that Mandy has provided here on the Michaels Zoom platform. And she has very explicit directions for all of her projects that she's worked on. One of the other things is the color wheel, which just popped up on the chat as well. It's available at Michaels. They're, you know, also on different websites, on the Winsor Newton website as well. There is a Winsor Newton color wheel. So it's a fundamental, I guess, tool, would you say, or a resource that we've been using the last few classes that Mandy, I think, has given a lot of good insights to color mixing. So great tool. And thanks for the feedback on that, everyone.
Oh, sure. Okay, so I'm going to start to dry my layer 4. But yes, the color wheel, it is an invaluable tool. And I think you will really, if you study color theory, you start using the color wheel to help you with color choices. I think that alone will really help your artistry and just give you more confidence even as you create art. So if you don't have a color wheel, yeah, buy one from Michaels, find one online, print it off. They are so helpful. Okay, so we are ready for layer 5. Layer 5 is the last layer that's only going to receive 2 drops of ink into the water mixture. So place 2 more drops into the water mixture, and then the number is going to change for the subsequent layers. Go ahead and stir up that water ink mixture. And layer 5, you should be able to squeeze on 6 to 7 scallops. I'm going to count mine to see what I'm able to do here. 1, 2, 3. Fill in, move towards the middle.
Mandy, when you get a chance, can you, after you finish these next scallops, can you bring the image closer to the camera so we can see
Absolutely.
the variations of the
Sure
color
thing.
that's creating the layers, please?
Sure. Okay, so I squeezed on a little bit more than 6 to 7. So just squeeze on whatever you can. Just make this new layer just slightly smaller than the last layer. It's going to be slightly more pigmented because we're adding ink to that mixture. And I'm going to pull this up in a second here as soon as I get this last one done. 1, 2.
And as she's continuing these scallops and pulling in the color, she's getting ever so slightly moving inward towards the center. So you will see those different variations that you see in the image to your left.
That is correct.
So she will be using more of the ink to create that darker effect.
And it really starts to come together towards the end, because here's a close-up of the finished one. And you can see it's really when you start to do those last layers that the first layers we've been doing really start to pop and reveal themselves. And as we add more ink to our water mixture, the ink is going to become more bright, and it's going to be a little bit easier to see when it's wet because it's becoming more ink than water, or at least equal amounts. And then you'll notice when it starts to dry, it darkens just a little bit, like a lot of paint does. The paint dries just a little bit before. And I see this question about pencil lines. I'll address that. So normally I use a really light graphite pencil, like a 4H or a 5H, so that the graphite lines don't even really show when I'm done. So I don't really need to erase anything. I learned that for these classes, it's really helpful if I use a darker graphite color so you can see what I'm doing. It will be slightly hard to erase these underneath the drying ink. So if you don't have a 4H pencil, what you can do is you can take an eraser and just lift a little bit of the graphite so that you can still see it, but so that it's super light. So I'll show you what I mean by that with this stem here. So I'm just going to use light pressure, and I'm just going to run my eraser over the stem so that I'm not completely erasing it, so I can still see it, so I know where to paint. But when I add the ink to it, the graphite will be so light that I won't be able to see it underneath the ink. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and add that. So if you don't have a 4H pencil, you can, before you start painting, lift some of the graphite with an eraser, and that will help. Okay, so we are ready for layer 6. Layer 6, we're going to add 3 drops of the ink to our ink and water mixture. So 3 drops. So we're adding higher concentrations of ink now than what we have on any of the previous layers. Layer 6, let's try and do 5 to 6 scallops. So it's almost like just drawing a flower, like when you were a child. So I'm just going to draw 1, 2, or paint, not draw, 3, 4, 5, 6. You see that, how I did the outline of a flower? And I'm going to fill it in. Now we're working with small enough layers that you can probably just outline the whole thing and then fill it in with ink before it dries. But hopefully that helps. It kind of looks like one of those flower cookie cutters, a scalloped cookie. And we're going to do that to all of them. So just right in the middle, paint on 6 or so petals for your flower. Fill them in. So you can see what I mean, how it's a lot brighter now. You see how bright and vivid that is? It's really easy to see because we have so much ink down there. I'm going to repeat the process to the bottom one.
And I just want to check your time. It's 2:48.
All right.
There's a couple more layers to go with the flowers, and then we want to do the stems and the leaves.
The stems and the leaves are super fast. They're more of an abstract technique.
Okay.
The blooms looked so perfect. I wanted to bring some movement into the piece so it wouldn't look so flat. So the stems and leaves are really fast. Let's blow dry layer 6. And you'll notice that the bright red will turn to more of a brick red shade, which is the name of the drying ink that we're using. So as soon as it turns to that darker brick red color, you know it's dry. And for layer 7, we're going to add 3 more drops of ink. We're going to give it a stir. And right in the middle, we're going to draw a 4-leaf clover. That's the best way I can put it. So I'm going to draw a 4-leaf clover right in the middle. Or you could even say it's the outline of a butterfly. You see that under the camera? So a 4-leaf clover or butterfly, fill it in. And you're going to do that to every single one. So this is quick because you're only painting on 4 petals like a 4-leaf clover or butterfly. And I'm still trying, if I can, to start my first one so it goes in between 2 scallops from the previous layer, but it's okay if you don't. These layers are partially hidden by the pollen we're going to add in a second, or the anthers. So as soon as you get your 4-leaf clovers on, go ahead and blow dry this layer. And this is when you're probably going to start seeing that shellac binder show a little bit. It's going to dry with sort of a shiny film. Well, that's the shellac that's in the binder. Okay. So now layer 8 is the last one for petals. We're going to add the anthers in just a second, but for layer 8, we're going to add 4 drops. We're going to really kick it up with the ink. So 4 drops into your water ink mixture, stir it up, and we're going to do a 3-leaf clover. So 3 leaves. So 1, 2, 3. I'll put this up on the camera so you can see, like a 3-leaf clover, if you will, right in the middle. And we're going to do that to every bloom. And the number 10 brush is just really perfect for this because you're able to paint on these petals so quickly because it's such a big brush. And then we can use our heat gun to dry them. It's so pretty. I just love this effect. Okay, and now we're ready for the anthers. So we're going to use our brilliant green now. The color theory I wanted to talk to you really quickly about is if you mix any 2 complementary colors completely together equally, like in equal amounts, it produces a neutral gray color. If you add a complementary color to its complement only in part, so if I were to add red just in small part to green, or just green in small part to red, it makes those colors less vibrant. So adding green to the red will make the red less vibrant and make it even a little bit darker. And if I were to add red to green, it would make this green less vibrant and just a little bit darker. So to teach you a little bit about color theory, this is what we're going to do today, because I thought this would be a good project to do it. And it will also make the stems and leaves look more sagey green, like a more true green that you would see on plants or flowers. But we're going to do the same thing for the anthers because I want the anthers to stand out. I want you to be able to see them. So we want to make a slightly darker mix of the red, so we can do that with the brilliant green. So open up your brilliant green. So we're not going to be mixing them in equal parts. We're going to be adding them a little bit to the other to sort of de-intensify or make the color we're adding it to a little bit less vibrant. Grab the 3rd pipette that we haven't used yet, squeeze the top, place it in your brilliant green, release. It'll suck up the green drying ink. And we are going to add 3 drops of brilliant green to the red ink mixture, 3 drops. So there's a lot more red in here than green. So we're not turning it green and we're not turning it gray. We're just de-intensifying it. And so take a number 2, your number 2 brush. Because this is such a thin brush, I'm not going to worry about wetting it in the water first. I'm just going to go ahead and stir the ink mixture, and the bristles will absorb enough of the ink and water mixture to be able to paint with. And I'll show you on my little scrap thing here. If I were to brush this right on top of the pure red, you can see how it's a much darker version of the red because we added green. It's much less vibrant. So if you were in my snowflake class, we're going to add the anthers and pollen in the same way as we applied the tiny dots on some of the snowflakes. So I'm just going to hold my brush up and down, and I'm just going to lightly touch it onto the paper. And I'm going to put a dozen or so little dots right in the middle of the bloom. And I'm going to try not to have these dots touch each other, because if I do, they'll kind of bleed into each other and make a blob. And then after I have some dots right in the middle, I am going to just fan them out just a little to where that 4-leaf clover layer was. So I'm just going to fan them out a little. I'll hold this up to the camera so you can see. So they're more concentrated in the middle, and then I sort of fan them out just a little bit in the center of the bloom. Just tiny little dots using the very tip of my brush. And I'm going to repeat that to the second and the third. So just a dozen or so right in the middle, and then just a few that surround the middle, kind of spread out. And you can see I'm holding my brush straight up and down to apply these little dots, and I'm just barely touching the brush to the paper, just enough to deposit a tiny little dot. Just like so. And not to move too fast because we're running out of time here. I'm going to go ahead and dry this layer really fast. It won't take much. And then I'm going to add 3 more drops of the green, the brilliant green. So make sure you have the green, not the red. 3 more drops to our ink water mixture. Gonna give it a stir with my number 2 brush. We're still with the number 2. And I'm going to apply another 12 or so dots, but this time only to the very center. I'm not gonna sort of spread them out or fan them out. I'm only gonna apply 12 just to the very center because I just wanna further intensify the middle of that flower. And, you know, it doesn't have to be 12. If you like how it looks after 5, you know, stop at 5. I just put approximately 12 or so right in the middle. You can see how it just sort of helps the middle of the flower stand out a bit more. And it just sort of completes that gradient effect we did by applying layer after layer after layer of slightly darker, slightly more saturated color. And then I'm not going to worry about drying this because we're actually done with the blooms and we're ready to just quickly paint on the stems and the leaves.
Mandy, could you show that to the camera close up, please?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So I'm placing my brushes down. I'm still not placing them in the water. I'm going to do that in a second, but I'm not going to do it yet. I'm going to pull finally my water glass back down with my pipette, and I'm going to dispense 5 drops of water into 2 wells of my palette. So we're going to be making 2 equal ink to water mixes. So 5 drops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, into 2 wells of my palette. Only 5 drops. So 10 drops total, but 5 and 2 palettes, or 2 wells. I'm saying palettes, 2 wells of the palette. So like I said, we're going to make an equal ink to water mixture in these 2 palettes. And the first one, so for me, it's the one that's directly left to my red paint mixture. I'm going to put 4 drops of brilliant green in it. 4 drops of brilliant green and 1 drop of brick red. So it's 5 drops of water, 4 drops of brilliant green, 1 drop of brick red. And then into the other one, I'm going to do 3 drops of brilliant green and 2 drops of brick red. All right, and I'm just going to place those aside. We're going to use our number 10 brush for this because I'm done with my water. I am going to swoosh my number 10 brush just really quick in that water. And then I'm going to just dab it on my paper towel. And then I'm done with my water for the project itself. And I'm going to use my number 10 brush. I'm going to stir the one that has the 4 drops of green in it and the 1 drop of red. And then without cleaning my brush, I'm going to go ahead and stir the other one that has the 3 drops of green and the 2 drops of red. So we have 1 green that is more of a sage avocado green. And then we have another green that's even darker. Okay, so we have a darker green, a lighter green, but they both look like true greens that you would see on flowers. And then we still have our red mixture that's more of a brown now. So we're going to use all 3 of these to paint on our stems and leaves, but we're going to use majority of the greens. So here's the thing. You can use any color combination you want. This is meant to be loose, more abstract. If you're new at painting and you don't feel like you have a lot of control of your brush, this is perfect for you because I am not going to try to paint on a perfect straight line. I want it to be kind of jagged and loose and free. So I'm going to start, and you could start anywhere, but I'm going to go ahead and start with my lighter green. And I'll show you on this one. I'm just going to pull it up just in a real jagged, messy way up to the flower. And if I skip over a part of the paper, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to let it be. All right. And then while the ink is still wet, I might dip my brush, the very tip of it, into one of the other green shade and just sort of drop some of that color into the stem, or I might make the base of the stem just a little bit thicker. It's up to you. And then to paint on the leaves, you can do two things. You can just place your brush onto the paper, like lay it down on the paper and then just pull it to the stem. And that can be your leaf. Or what you could do is you could do one scallop sort of stroke using one color, then place the tip of your brush into one of the other colors and then do another scallop stroke going the other direction to make a slightly thicker leaf. If you want, you can even drop in some of that brownish red we have now and let the inks bleed into each other and do their thing. I like the element of having like a thin tip on the leaf. To do that, you literally just do a couple, see if I can do it so you can see on camera, do a couple dots and thin lines to connect it to the leaf. So it's very abstract. You're just being really loose with your movements, okay? So I'll show you again with the small one and with this long one. Maybe this one, I'll choose the darker green. So I'm just gonna put my brush in the darker green and just sort of dot it up that line without trying to be careful or precise. I'll stick with the same green. I'll do the thicker leaf. So I'll do one sort of C stroke or scallop
Mandy,
stroke. Yes.
sorry, I need to interject a little bit because we're going to be wrapping up. We're going to lose some of the people. So first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for participating. The class will be available at michaels.com/classes in 24 to 48 hours. You will also be receiving an email with a survey, which we'd love for you to complete because it gives us feedback about Mandy, the class, the curriculum, feedback that we would love to have from you, and then it'll allow us to curate more classes. We have some really good feedback about other different topics of artwork that we're going to continue to show you, but Mandy will show you a couple things as previews of things she has going forward, which I think you'll enjoy. But just so you realize, as in any art, it seems like Mandy, you made a little mistake there with that little pink.
I did.
And it happens. So
It
she's
does.
not going to erase it. We could put another leaf over it and she could do something about that. So it's just your own creation. Please look at the video at your convenience, and Mandy's going to give you some updates. All her information is in the top right corner. So if you look at the recording, all this information will be available also on Mandy's website. And why don't you give us a sneak preview, and then after that you could wrap it up for us. So
I will. Yes, sure. Okay, because I do want to walk you through this last stem just in case you didn't catch it the first two times. But this is my next class coming up in March. It's a watercolor rooster. It uses all the colors in the Cotman Sketchers Pocket Box set, but we use some of the colors in a very creative way to get a gradient effect or technique. So show up for that one if you want to learn more about that. I also have an Eastern Bluebird watercolor class coming up. So some of my next classes are maybe a little bit more advanced, beginner, intermediate, but if you're a beginner, please still come. You will learn a lot. And then in April, I think, there's this egg nest, and this one uses masking fluid to create the technique of all of the twigs on the bird's nest. So this is a really fun one as well. And it's basically just layering light to dark. So I hope you'll come to those. And okay, so I want to show you this last stem, just walk you through the process one more time. And then I want to show you how I clean my palette, because these are inks in a shellac binder, so it's a little bit different than watercolor. So real quick, I'll just show you. I'm gonna maybe just use my lighter green. I'm just gonna do a real loose jagged line on the stem. And then again, you have two options for leaves. You can just basically lay your brush down on the paper and then just pull it to the stem and pick up maybe a little bit of another color and do a couple dots and lines at the tip to just give a little bit of an accent. To do the thicker leaves, maybe I'll use the brown here. You'll do one scallop or C stroke, maybe pick up another color and do the same thing on the other side. And then again, you can do little dots and lines to accent the leaf. And you can always drop in other colors to intensify the ink while it's still wet. There's a lot of fun, loose things you can do, but I just think doing that sort of loose leaves and stems made this less perfect looking, which it was important to me. Okay, so how to clean your palette. If you wait for this to dry, it's going to be hard and it's going to look like there's resin in it or shellac. So I like to take my paper towel, and while the ink is still wet, I like to absorb what's in my palette, and I'll kind of twist my paper towel. And this just makes it a little bit easier to clean your palette. And then you can just dispose of your paper towel. And then
Andy,
yes.
Would you please show your final artwork before you check out, I guess, or sign off? So we have a good close view of your final
sure.
work. So everyone could enjoy seeing that.
This was the original where, you know, I took my time. And then here's the one from today. But they look very similar, I think. It's still the same technique and effect. And then as far as these go, your dispensers and your ink, just put whatever ink is left in your dispenser back into your jar. I reuse my dispensers, so I like to just clean them in the water until the dispenser is or the pipette, I shall say, is removed of the ink. But that is how you clean your palette, and that way, you know, you won't have a bigger mess on your hands if you wait for the ink to dry in your palette. So with that, I really appreciate you guys being here today. I hope you learned a lot. More importantly, I hope you had a lot of fun doing it. I really enjoy spending this time with you all, and I hope you have a wonderful day.